Alka, welcome. Thanks for giving us time. We are delighted to have you on this forum and would love to hear more about you and what conspired you to start Sangati. What is Sangati Foundation all about? And we'll take it from there.
Sure. Thanks a ton, Aakash. And it's my pleasure and my privilege to be here talking to you and through you to so many people and so many geographies that you had to, start with a good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So those are the wonders of, modern day globalization and the technology, which I am proudly a part of. And yes, I am a telecom space person. So, all through COVID, we have worked doubly hard to give this, this basic service, essential service now it turns out to be, to the people across India. And very happy to share my journey with all of you. Sangati Foundation, the vision statement is we want to improve accessibility, mobility, inclusivity, and visibility of people with disability in India. And when I talk of these four terms, they are actually very, very significant. Most people don't even talk about visibility generally, but what we have realized is that if people with disability are not visible around you, you tend to not realize they are part of you, they are part of the society, and they have certain specific needs, special needs, which need catering to. So there are examples of, let's say restaurants which would say, why should we build a ramp? There's hardly anyone who visits us on a wheelchair. So visibility is that part where you see people around you who have special needs so that you can, empathize with them. You can know how to interact with them. I've seen people who don't know how to interact with, let's say, somebody who needs guidance because they are visually challenged, or because you don't know sign language, you cannot converse with a person who is, not able to hear. And there are so many examples which you just consider as hurdles in your integrating and including people with different abilities into your own circle. How I started Sangati is, I get to answer that question quite a few times, and I hope, that, let's say, that trigger I'm able to convey every time. I was, as, let's say, ignorant about the issues, as most of us are, a few years back. My father-in-law, who was suffering from a neurological degenerative disease, shifted in with us, and he started losing the use of his limbs, his lower limbs, the legs. And that is when we shifted him to first the walker and then the wheelchair. And that is when, and he was quite fond of traveling out, looking at the flowers, going out to restaurants to eat, and so on and so forth. And whenever I would try taking him out, it would always be a realization that I cannot go in. There'll be people, of course, who will say that, I'll lift the wheelchair and put it up, but that's not really dignified. Especially if, if it was a woman on the wheelchair, it was quite a, embarrassment to be dependent on someone to physically lift your chair and then go in. And that is when I realized that, ramps are such essential parts of how we make a space accessible to somebody who's on wheelchair. And that planted the seed in my thought process. I would go to several offices and actually, or even hotels and restaurants and, places where there was no ramp, and I would get into an argument with them. Why isn't a ramp here? And I would get, all kinds of answers, ranging from, as I said, who comes in on a wheelchair to it costs too much, it's not practical, so on and so forth. And to top it all, which organization are you from? Which is where I thought that, having a proper organization is also essential if you have to do some kind of advocacy. So that is when Sangati was kind of registered as a foundation. It is a trust. My co-founder, incidentally, is a wheelchair user for the past 25 years, and he's totally independent. He's a financial professional. He has traveled in his modified car on Indian highways for about 50,000 kilometers in total. So it's a complete, inspiration for me, how it should actually be, a complete inclusion of society that we should be driving. And he does give a lot of ideas as to what really is required. So that's how Sangati was formed, and it was a very peculiar date also. It was Valentine's Day on 2019 that we actually got formed. So 14th Feb 2019 is when Sangati has its birthday.
Well, thank you for sharing the story of how it got conceptualized, right? And I think just given that we have global audience, I want to sensitize people that situation might be different in different countries. Countries like India, where a lot of things are not present, versus when you go to the West, a lot of things are already there. So it could be different situation. I think what we are trying to do with this session is one, to create awareness, and two, if you guys know, we set out 4 goals for ourselves, right? One is to create awareness, and the second one is to actually make all our offices across the globe differently abled accessible, which is what Alka was talking about right now, right? And a very, very good point. We don't notice because those people don't come out. They say, how do I go out, right? And so we don't even notice them. But if we start doing things, then we start noticing people. And PayU wants to be a diverse and an inclusive organization, which is where we want to go. So Alka, question for you and team. There is a Slido link that has been posted. Please feel free to ask your questions as well. We will probably keep last 15 minutes of this conversation to take up some of your questions. But what are some of the challenges that these differently abled people face? And let me ask you one more question, which is it politically incorrect to call people disabled versus differently abled? What is their view on that? And what are some of the challenges that those people face, so that we are aware what the real challenges are versus what the myths are?
So as far as nomenclature is concerned, Aakash, it's been a learning journey for me also. Indian government, I don't know how many people would be aware, but they started using the term Divyangjan. Divyangjan in English translation would roughly mean somebody who has been blessed with a special limb. That's the actual, a holy limb, maybe, right? That's the actual translation. And for some time, I was under the impression that this is a special term, and it must be, highly appreciated. But to my surprise, a lot of people have expressed dismay at the use of, what is holy in our being, let's say, deprived of a leg or a hand or anything of that sort. Also, there is, by using the term related to limb, you are actually narrowing the field of disability. And that is something which I had not realized, that there is a large section, a subsection of people who suffer with invisible disabilities. Now, invisible disabilities are something which are not even recognized in some parts of the world. They are in US, for example, they are recognized as disability, but otherwise they are not. And some of them are, we don't even know the medical terms of that, or we will not be able to recognize that a person is suffering from all of that. And there are acute pains, there is chronic pain, and all of that happens, which actually entails some amount of consideration for a normal life. There has to be some um, useful tools which help them conduct their life with the same kind of dignity and independence that we are so used to. Now, their needs are extremely diverse as the actual disability is. And obviously we can't bucketize too much of it, but yes, there are buckets which have been formed, and locomotor disability is one, for example. Hearing is different, speech is different. Mental disabilities or learning disabilities also have a wide variety, and they all have different needs and different functional levels to themselves. So their needs are very diverse. Their challenges are very diverse. Now, coming back to the term, most people whom I have interacted with in India, who they actually form a lot of public opinion on this, prefer the term person with disability, because they do not want to be identified only as a disabled person. That's not the sum and substance of their being, that the person is disabled or differently abled for that matter. It is a person with disability. That is the term which is most preferred by at least the section which I have interacted with in public space. Why I'm qualifying this again and again is because, as I admitted, I was under the impression Divyangjan is actually a good term till I was told that please don't use it in our presence. So that is why I'm saying that I may be, let's say, privy to certain, let's say, mindsets or certain opinions, and there might be others. So person with disability is what I have realized is the most preferred term, and that is what I go with now. I had started with a differently abled and Divyangjan also in my, posts and whatever I would write. But now I'm sticking with people with disability or a person with disability. That's it.
Okay, great. So that's the first myth, right? In trying to be politically correct and people call it differently abled, it's actually, yeah, people with disabilities, and that's fine because it is what it is, right? So there is no hiding away from the fact. Let's move to some of the challenges, right? Meaning, what kind of challenges do these people face? There is a in my world, right? The way I see it, people don't need sympathies, and we should not be sympathetic to anybody, whether it is disabled or not. People need empathy, which is great for everybody. But there is a growing thing, right? Saying, hey, people kind of look at you sympathetically if you are blind, or if you can't walk properly, or if you can't hear, etc., etc. What do these people say? What is it that they want? What is it that they need?
So one point which I feel very strongly is that each one of us has some kind of disability always. When we have a limited thought process, when we have certain misconceptions or divisive thoughts and all of that, that is also a kind of disability. Now what happens is that some disabilities are so apparent or so visible to us that we start treating people with such disabilities in a very different way. Different meaning, imagine yourself coming face to face, or your child coming face to face with a person, with a child who has Down syndrome. Now, Down syndrome is something which is very evident on the face. And they are not similar, right? They might be dribbling. They might be, not able to speak, so on and so forth. They might not be able to walk. Now, when a person like this is, met with, you kind of draw away from that person, not really, go out and engage with them. I think inclusion is something which is most missing, because they do not form, part of your framework of what normal is. You kind of draw away from them and don't interact, and which is not right. So inclusion is something which I think everybody wants. A man is a social animal. You don't like to be, disengaged with, right? Uh, and I'm sure everybody in these COVID times has realized that what social distance can actually do to you. It can actually, make you very lonely and kind of cut off from the society, which is what a major problem or a major challenge with everyone who is suffering with a disability or living with a disability faces all the time. This being cut off from the mainstream. And Sangati has been, working very hard to mainstream these people so that, they are present all around you and they can do the same things which you and I do. For example, if I want to go to a movie on a Friday evening, I should be able to go. I should not be able to, not know which of the seats are accessible, for instance, or which of the seats can give me an announcement of what is going on the screen. This is for the visually disabled. Um, Internationally, there are studios and theaters which make sure that there is a lot of announcement on the seat, and you can actually, enjoy, even if you're a visually disabled person, you can enjoy movies. But in India, it's a long time coming. We went after PVR to kind of start marking their seats as accessible. And thankfully, that was something which PVR agreed to, and they've started doing. PVR is, by the way, for others, a chain of cinema halls across India. And they have started marking their, accessible seats where wheelchair users can sit. It is still not equipped with closed captioning or in movie announcements. That will take some time to come, but at least the wheelchair accessibility has been ensured. There are, even other stuff like if you started traveling across India, you will not find accessible toilets for a wheelchair user to use. All the toilets are, either up or down, or their doors are so narrow that a wheelchair cannot go in and you cannot rotate the wheelchair, so it can't be used. I have met people who don't use wheelchairs but who actually slide themselves on ground using their hands. And imagine if they were to go inside a toilet which was dirty, they don't go in, right? So the public toilet system is kind of broken for people with disability. Or if you are a blind person, there is no indication to tell you where is the seat, whether the toilet is for men or women. So they do get, very dependent upon somebody to kind of accompany them all the time and, help them. And I've met people who are on wheelchair who haven't stepped out of their houses for 2, 3 years, even young guys. And when you ask them why not, they would say that, where would we go? Our parents are hardly able to take us to a doctor if we need. How will we go out and, move about on our own self? Because accessibility is such an issue. Similarly, for, in educational institutions, they're not inclusive. You will build let's say, a blind school where the schooling is very segregated. So all the students are blind, and of course the teachers are capable of teaching the blind, but then you are not getting included in the mainstream. You are not interacting with people who are not blind. So, it's not a normal or a healthy development with a diverse kind of a group or a friend circle that you grow up with. So these are, different kinds of barriers that we have created to an inclusive society, and that is what really pains, I suppose, a lot of them, most of them, and they also feel very, ill-equipped to handle the either the extreme sympathy or the total ignorance of people. Both of it is very evident, also because we are not really comfortable with dealing with them.
So, team, we are hearing enormous amount of challenges that the disabled people have to go through, right? And different geographies will have different challenges, for sure. Now, that's one part of it, right? But challenge has an opportunity, and we can be the change makers. So, question, Alka, to you is: we as PayU, what can we do? Because every small step that we take will help. But what is it that we as good corporate citizens can do to make some real change on the ground?
I'll answer your question in a slightly roundabout fashion, Akash. I'll tell you what kind of experiences I have had in the corporate world or in the general professional world, as far as people with disabilities are concerned. We have in Sangati tried to make everything inclusive. So right from skill development to education, which is inclusive, or to employment, which has to be inclusive, is what we have aimed at. Now, what happens typically is that when we talk about offering employment for people with disability, most people have this as a target. Diversity. There are several diversity champions throughout the industry and all industries actually. But what really happens is that when you go out and try to seek a candidate, you are looking for a certain qualification. So that's the first stumbling block which happens, because most people who have lived with disability through their lives have not been able to get the right education to the right level and to the qualification that you would expect, right? Secondly, they also do not know what is it that you are looking for people. So there is a small section of people who are educated, but they don't know how they would be viewed in general in the corporate world or any professional space for that matter. We have also come across candidates where some organizations have kept a reserved quota for people with disability. They have taken people with disability and they have not been given any job. As in, there's no role. So there was a blind person in Mumbai, big town, right? It's a metropolitan, megapolis actually, who has been employed in their municipal corporation for about 3 years, and he's but he's very good in in computers, in making documentation, in keeping records and accounts and all of that. He says, I have visited my office a couple of times, and I'm told, okay, you have got a job, fine, find a seat, sit somewhere, no need to work. Now that becomes very, inhuman as a treatment. You do not include them in your general workforce, and that was the pain that he had, and we've been trying to sort out something which he can be given as a job role and he can perform, and that is taking some work. Similarly, there are people in who have applied in railways, but they have not got the calls, or their their qualifications don't matter. And we have done skill development for a lot of people who are barely class 12th pass. And why I kept that as a qualifying criteria is because school studies are still available in India as open schooling, right? Somebody can do it even without being part of a formal institution, which is not inclusive. You can still pass till class 12, but colleges are another matter altogether. So you cannot get a professional degree or a proper qualification of the graduation, etc. So what I kept it as a qualifying criteria was just class 12th. And we started giving them skill development courses. Things like, MS Office, for instance, or accounting and tally software, or AutoCAD-based designing, or website development, or mobile app development. These are the courses that we have started online. And this all started during Corona because everybody was so used to coming online and getting, all the education online. So uh, the mindset had actually changed. Now, what happens is once they are ready with these skills, any organization, and I have been in corporate world for 6 years now, and professional world as such for 25 plus years. I know that when I look for a person or for a resource, I'm looking for certain aspects, like, maybe somebody is working just on PowerPoint presentations, right? And if somebody can do that, why not? So those are the aspects that we are trying to teach, something which can be used as a qualification for getting jobs. It could also be a freelance kind of business that, I make a document for you and I'll turn it around in a day and you pay me. So sitting from their, whatever comfort zones they are in, and on their machines, they can actually start earning for themselves. And that, to my mind, is actually a sea change, because everyone whom I have met have been dependent upon their family for their sustenance. The moment you give somebody that empowerment to earn for yourself, it becomes transformative. So that was the context with which I started saying that. So when from PayU, when you start considering people to be employed, it would be great if you could tell us, or people like us who are working in the sector, what exactly are you looking for? And we will make sure that we render to you the candidates who are ready for it. If Lemon Tree Hotels, for example, they take deaf and dumb students for their front end jobs, they have to undergo training after that, because most of them are coming without any device experience, or not having handled a tablet or anything of that sort, but those are required. So if we can make candidates available to you who are trained in these aspects, the basics, right? Then you can take them in and groom them into very successful professionals. And that's my belief that can be done.
You've definitely given us some homework to do. So yes, we will think through this. However, I think we as an organization, right, we believe in slow progress, but good progress, right? So we don't want to make tall claims saying I'm going to hire 100 people who are disabled, etc., because for us, that is also stage 2. I think stage 1 is creating awareness among people. We talked about what the myths are versus what reality is. How do you deal with somebody who's disabled, right? In the organization, is the physical infrastructure of the organization ready to actually have them, right? Because otherwise they will have to seek help and support, etc. So those are some of the first steps that we are taking. And the next step that we've kind of laid out for ourselves also is whatever products that we launch on the tech side, right? We have a product called Lazy Pay. Can visually impaired people actually access it? What do we need to do to make it accessible? We've also hired an organization called DEOC, which is Diversity and Equal Opportunity. It's a government-run organization where the entire ProSUS group actually is working. ProSUS and NASPERS is working with them to evaluate our facilities, to evaluate our products and services that we offer to the customer, and then what are the changes that we need to do to make it disabled friendly. Once we do all this, then I think we will go to hiring. We've already set some goals for ourselves. We've hired one person, but that is more around what you said, right? It's not, I don't have to tick the box saying, okay, my goal was to hire 4 people. I've hired and I'm paying them salary, but they have nothing to do. No. That's not. They are amongst us. They are one amongst us. They will do the work that we are doing. For that, we want to take baby steps, and I think that's progressing well. Um, Shifting gears a little, right? So there is corporate citizen, what we should do, and then there is I as an individual. So PayU is an organization with 3,000 people, and I believe that the buck stops at me. In everything that you do, the buck stops at me, right? So what's your advice to those 3,000 people as to how can they, as an individual, the organization will drive the goals and obviously you will work towards it as a part of the organization. But how do you do it in your own personal life if you can? What are some of the small steps that you can take in causing that change? In the context of everybody's busy, in the context of Alka is very busy, right? CTO of a $12 billion company, very busy. But how do you do your personal contribution also in this field?
So 2, 3 parts to this. One is that, I'm a woman. I'm in the infrastructure sector, which was very, rare for a woman to enter. So the diversity there was also related to gender, right? And when I first entered the telecom space, etc., we did not have, so many trainings for how to deal with a woman. But now there are. There are actually workshops which tell you how to talk to a woman, how to talk to a colleague who is a woman, and so on and so forth. Now that, to my mind, is actually, bringing the aspect of male versus female to the fore, which I don't like. So similarly, for people with disability, I don't think there is a need to focus on the differences. I don't think there is a need to focus on, what cannot be done or why this person is going to, face challenges, or poor guy or poor lady and so on and so forth. I think the matter to be focused upon is, it's an individual. How do you recognize the strengths in that person? Trust me, if a person is living with disability, the very fact that if you see a smile, that is a stamp of bravery. It is that hard. So that person is special. Now, when you go and talk to anybody, to female colleagues of yours, do you really keep diversity in mind? You do not. You talk to them as, as a colleague, as a normal person. Similarly, if you can talk to, people with disability as you would talk to any other person, that's the first step towards inclusion. And that's, I think, the biggest individual contribution anybody can make. I have seen people talk over the head of a person who is differently abled as if, that person does not exist, which is very inhuman to my mind. So I think just treating them as another person would be a great start as an individual. Every step, every way that you actually go about your life and your working space and your personal space, if you're a little bit more considerate as to, how, as an aside, I must tell you, there's a restaurant near Ahmedabad who actually blindfolds you and gives you an experience in dark of eating without guidance, and that is to show you what a blind person feels every moment of his life. Now, if you were to put yourself in their shoes, there's a lot of empathy which will come naturally. If there's somebody who doesn't have, let's say, a hand, you can, visualize what's going to be the issue in, let's say, handling things or lifting things and so on and so forth. Or if somebody is on wheelchair, can you actually press the buttons of the lift for that person? I mean, these are very, very, small things. But once you start relating to that person, I think rest of it falls in place. And that's what I think everybody can do very easily. And I'm ashamed to admit I wasn't the one to, first do it initially till I had started focusing on it. I was as maybe careless as any other person. But once I have, once that realization hit hard, it has actually corrected me at a lot of places. So I think that helps.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think I'm sure each one of us can do that in our own right, right? Don't look at the differences, look at the similarities and treat them as fellow human being, like we do in gender diversity, etc., etc. That's a great starting point, right? And being able to relate and have the empathy. So I remember the story of a guy who I ran half marathon with. He was visually impaired. I held his hand and we ran together. Obviously, that created empathy in my mind, but I didn't have to be sympathetic with that person. So life teaches lessons, but we can all contribute. On that note, Alka, we have actually quite a few questions, right? And I want to uh, take up most of the questions. So, team, if you have any questions, please post it. I can already see some questions here. Maybe I start with the first one. And you can post your name as well, right? There is nothing to hide here. But so we start with, can you share with us some examples of what other companies have been doing in this field? Um, I'm sure you've interacted with a lot of people, so can you share some examples of what other companies are doing in this field?
So I have seen a lot of, banking and insurance companies offer employment to people who are visually impaired also. See, these days the technology has made it very, very, possible for the visually challenged to also contribute in their own way. So the digital medium is actually, completely accessible. I wouldn't say completely. There are apps which or websites which do not render themselves for announcements, and that is how a blind person actually navigates because there's a closed loop feedback which comes into their, headset. But it is possible. So people have been given roles uh, like mine or yours, and they can deliver. So that's not an issue. I have with me people who are disabled in, let's say, locomotor abilities, and they are still in the infrastructure companies and performing their duties. So, as I said, if you have a role in mind, uh, please do not distinguish between, the physical disability or even the mental disability for that matter. You would be surprised to note that uh, autism, many of you might know, is a full spectrum. There is, a spectrum which is a part of the spectrum which is completely functional. So I have a close friend's daughter who got offer from ENY just last month, and despite autism, or rather has been told that we are employing you because of your autism, because you bring diversity and a very different thought process which you will contribute with. And there are only 5 people who have been selected from all over India, and she's one of them, and she's so thrilled. If you give one person that opportunity to perform in public space, there are 100 others who actually look at you and feel very empowered and feel that it is possible. So that is where you create more opportunities for people, more enablement for people. So there are quite a few examples where if you have identified a role, you make things fall in place, and that's all that is required for each one of us, right? If you walk into an office, the first thing you want to know, where is the cafeteria? If somebody was not telling you where the cafeteria is, you will actually feel very left out in a new environment. The first thing I do for ice breaking is to offer tea or coffee to somebody who joins us new and take them over to the cafeteria or the tea vending machine. That's where you include them in your space. That's what is required. Only that level. So I think it's very doable, and a lot of companies are doing it. They do have diversity as an agenda, and it is getting fulfilled. So, as I said, two or three things have to be kept in mind. One is that whatever accessibility or enablement is required, that can be done very silently, not putting banners on it. The second thing is to identify what profile are you looking for. If there is a need for brushing up on that profile or giving some skill training, that can be done. And third is that the environment should be friendly enough and they should feel included. That's the most important thing.
Well, great insights again, right? Three things: friendly environment, accessibility, and just being inclusive, right? Not very hard, honestly, if you think about it, not very hard. Taking another question, and this is very interesting. Thanks, Simon, for asking this. How do we proactively embrace the strengths of people with disability? For example, deaf people who can listen as opposed to hear better than the able-bodied employee. So they say, right, you have five senses, and if one of the senses is kind of a bit low, then the other four are much stronger. So how do we play to their strengths? And have you seen any examples there?
So one strength that I have invariably found in everybody who is living with a disability is their immense strength of purpose. And that, to my mind, is the biggest gift that they actually bring to the organization. You won't see, people who are, let's say, disabled in any form, not being sincere to their work. I'm not saying, almost all of us are sincere. I'm not saying otherwise. But what I'm saying is they put in their extra bit to kind of, belong there. And that's something which is to be seen, to be believed. I think if we get a diverse candidate in our teams, the kind of value they add on is far more than somebody without a disability. That is one. Second is that each person is actually different. You can't, I don't want to club everybody together. So there are, wheelchair users who have a lot of strength in their arm and they have a sharp brain, but the other person might not, right? So clubbing them together doesn't help. You have to treat them as individuals. They would have some or the other strength, but it is for you to explore that and to find it out, discover it, which you do even with your friends, even with your relatives, even with your colleagues. That is what you do, right? Once you meet a person, you talk to them and know what they are good at. That's what happens with everybody.
Yeah. Again, it goes back to the point, right? They're not different. Yes, they have, because they have some disability and they have seen the world with very different set of eyes. Inherently, they are very strong. It adds a lot of value to the culture of the organization, being inclusive and also capitalizing on their strengths. Maybe we take one or two more questions and then we wrap up. But there is an interesting question here around, have you seen people with disability in leadership roles? Because there is a lot of talk around the same with gender diversity. We face problems where women join at the lower rung, but you being at such a senior level, how do we make sure that the funnel is not just at the bottom, but also goes all the way to the top?
So in my professional space, I am the champion for gender diversity, as you can very well imagine. that that's a role which kind of falls upon me. And as I said, I have, I was actually the first one to be in the management committee of an infrastructure company, which was a record of sorts, any which ways, and everywhere my team would kind of, speak about it, and it felt nice for a while. But then I realized that, if we are to get stuck at that, it wouldn't do me good, or I wouldn't have done my job. So I have opened up all the frontline positions for women. Everywhere that I would, face a challenge of, people saying, no, this can't be done by a woman, I have made it a point to prove that it can be done by a woman. And that is what I think should be done with people with disability also. If you do not take the first step, how will you ever find out if you are ready to go the whole way? And to answer your question, yes, I have seen people in leadership roles also, where but what I've also found very curious about it, most of the time they have hidden or camouflaged their disability. It is also because the surrounding area doesn't permit them to be open about it. But more often than not, you will see people camouflaging and then becoming successful. I want to be in a world where I don't have to hide my personality from anyone or my disability, and I can still be, as successful as the other person. Um, I would give you a small example. There's a position called Circle Quality Head, which actually is the person who is in charge for doing quality assurance in my company. Very significant role, and commands a team of, let's say, 25, 30 people. A lot of travel is involved. Um, I worked with that person for about, I'd already worked for about 10 months. And one day I was talking about Sangati to my team, and they are very interested in learning what all I'm doing new, and they keep asking me to, share my learning and my experiences. So I was doing that with my team, and that is when he spelled out that he has 60% disability. His hand, one of it, is shorter, and so he cannot lift too much of weight, and too much, things can't be done with that hand, and also with that same part of the leg also, that's not fully functional. I was amazed that he took 8 months, or rather, I took 8 months to recognize that, despite his disability, he's doing a wonderful job of ensuring that quality runs for me, right? So there are people in leadership positions. More often than not, you will not be able to figure out that they have disability. But that's also because of our blindness and not theirs.
Yeah, and I have actually seen super successful people in leadership roles. Tata Group has a few of them, people on wheelchair, and they actually come out and see me off. Like they will come out and see me off like a normal human being,
Yeah.
and they are themselves on wheelchair. He wouldn't sit in his office. He would actually take his wheelchair and see me off. So yes, there are people, but I think team, we are on this journey, right? And on this journey, as I said, we are taking small steps. We want to do a lot more over the course of next few years. But this is just the start. I think we are at about last 4 minutes. I'm going to wrap up. But first of all, thank you. Thanks, Alka, for giving us an hour of your time, which I know is extremely precious. Thank
while he's again out of network, I should take this opportunity to, thank you all actually for hearing me out for such a long
Be
time. And
empathetic, don't
absolutely a
be
pleasure and
sympathetic.
privilege.
And obviously create roles for.
You
Sorry, I don't know if.
you were fading in and out, so I took the opportunity to in between, but
Okay, no problem. No, lots of learnings from this conversation. Maybe Anuradha, you want to summarize if your connection is working fine and if you are still there. You take it over and put a summary here because I think my connection is just giving some problems.
for a telecom person, that's not good news.
Yes, I think this has been a phenomenal session, Alka. There is so much that we learned. Like you said, we are so often blind about the challenges that people face, and the beauty of all of it, right? The what they can achieve, and there are so many myths and so many learnings that we need to through. And I think we actually got down a lot of insights on what PayU can do about it. We are going to, like Aakash said, we have our homework lined up for us. We are going to work on it. And probably just to summarize some of the things that Aakash mentioned as to what PayU's goals are. We're going to be actively working on this topic. Creating awareness is one of the first things that we want. This was one of the first attempts to do that, and thanks a lot, Alka. I couldn't have expected for a better start to this journey. And we're already working with an organization called DEOC who will help us ensure that all our offices are fully accessible. That's also one of our goals, and then working to ensure that our product that goes out to the consumer, whether it is our Lazy Pay app or whether it is our corporate website, is again accessible. And finally, like you said, that once we have these basic factors in place, we would want to go out and do the hiring. But before that, also have a clarity as to what we want, because it shouldn't be a checklist exercise. It should actually mean something. So I think just to wrap up, a big thank you from all the pioneers around the globe. Thanks a lot for your time and thanks a lot for your insights.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. My pleasure, my privilege, absolutely.
Thanks, Alka. Thank you. Thank you. And thanks, team, for listening patiently to this. More to come. Best is yet to come, as we always say. Tomorrow is going to be a better day than today. So we'll continue to make big strides in this field as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe, everyone.